Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at how you can propagate a single comment into multiple titles that you can then use to display your comments from viewers in different contexts when you want different layouts. So before we get to that, I want to invite everybody, please, if you yourselves have any comments, any questions, anything you want some follow-up on, just post them below in whatever portal you're on, and we will try to get to them here live on the show. Also, if you would like to join us live here on the show, we would definitely welcome that. We have a link in the show notes, and we'll post this here on the screen. So if you connect to this URL, somebody from the studio will get you on, and you could join us live. Okay, so let me actually start by we have a lot of comments already, so let me just go and jump into comments, and then we'll dive into what we want to do here. So we have Michael giving us an hello from Denmark. Michael, always, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. And he's asking for the post show, if there's time, if we could discuss the best way to have a video auto fade to preview after playout is done, but the constraint would be that video is actually, one of the layers inside an input. So we'll think about some ways that may be possible, and we'll see where we get. I have a couple of ideas for that, Michael. So, Kyle, hello, thank you. Good to have you here. You demand. Greetings from Canada. It's good to have you here, and it's always fun to see you on the show. And we have Bill Mew. Bill, good to see you here, Bill. And Michael is saying, can vMix Social connect to all types of Facebook groups, page, etc., or are there limitations? So probably let me finish through the comments, and then we'll jump in to answer that, and then I'll get into the show itself. So, okay, so I'm just got told that's all the comments we have. So let me jump into this then. The Facebook has been changing things, and they have different rules for how you can go live in groups versus pages, and they've just introduced some things that I'm not fully appraised of yet, that limit like who can live stream to people with certain numbers of followers and so many days as a live, as being a member of Facebook. So there are some new constraints coming in. As a rule, you should be able to read comments that come from anything posted to a Facebook page. Facebook groups can be problematic, and I know there are permissioning issues with how third-party apps can read Facebook comments when they're inside of a group, because there's sort of a old fence around groups that is different from the page. So there is no simple answer other than the general guidance of use pages if you really want comments to live stream to a page if you really want to read the comments. And something that we're probably going to be looking into is maybe not using a specific Facebook tool, but like vMix Social, you have a Facebook plugin that does this. I have a feeling that doesn't always work, so we're definitely looking into what other possible packages there could be, but right now it just seems that anything that says it can do it is frighteningly expensive and subscription based. So I'll keep you apprised of that as we look at this ourselves. But thanks, Michael. Oh, and we have Refji, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, from Indonesia. Great to have you here, Refji. And Tom Eagle. Tom, good to see you here. Thanks for dropping in again. Automation for vMix from Sweden. Automation. Always good to have you on the show. Thank you. Okay, so let's jump right in here. And what I want to start with is I want to look first at the vMix social configuration page. So I have that sitting up here. So when you set this up, the way vMix social normally works is that across the top, you have the different places you can pull comments from. So Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, IRC, and now they've added Zoom into here. And what you do is you'll go and you'll log into each one of those that you're going to be using. And you will then take and specify which title inside of my vMix session, whatever session is up and running in vMix on this machine, which title do I want to leverage for my updates from comments. So when I send a comment and say, cue this or send it out as a comment, this is the title that's going to get updated with that vMix comment. And you can see that though you can pick any potential from a number of potential titles, you can only pick one at a time. So if you wanted to display comments dynamically, differently, you don't really have a way to do it. You'd have to go into vMix Social, change the comment that's being updated, and then make a switch in your production. And you can't do that remotely. There's no shortcuts that I could tell to let you change the title that you're using for vMix Social. So this is just, this is sort of the genesis of this show. How could I take and get a single title update from vMix Social, but then propagate that across multiple titles inside my production, each with different layouts, each for a different situation in my production. So how do GT titles and vMix Social work together? Let's sort of start there so we have a reference. Each one of the social titles is using specific names for elements inside the GT title that correspond to the element that vMix Social is going to publish into that title. So for instance, you have something that has to be called message for the actual text of the comment post. You have from photo, which will be the image of the person or the avatar of the person that posted the comment. You have, a set of images for what's the social icon that this was posted on. Is it from YouTube? Is it from Facebook? So things of that sort. So each one of these has a specific, and that's called source. So each one of these has a specific name that you have to have in your title. But when you have those names there, if you specify that title inside vMix Social, it will know where to put all the information it's pulling from the comments on these different portals. So that's how it works as a sort of as a general overview. And we are going to basically be taking that and using that same information to read the data from the GT title that we are using, and then to populate that, propagate that across other titles. So let me jump into the preset that I have here in vMix and show you a little bit about how we actually set this up. So in this preset over here, let's see if we get that on. Yep. So in this preset over here, it's not very large, but what I have is my first three inputs are the titles that I want to use for propagating the vMix Social. The first one, which I call root social, is the title that I'm assigning inside of vMix Social. So that's the title that vMix Social is going to publish data to. And then I have two other titles, Social 2 and Social 3. And these are the titles that we are going to read the data from root social and write it to these titles. So that's essentially what we're doing. Everything after that is then just sort of how we can present these. So I've set this up where I have, some backgrounds. I have presentation, they have different layouts that I can use, where this is with no titles, this is with the lower thirds title, this is with the slide inside title, and this is here with a title which has the full image to it. Where if somebody attached a photo or an image to a comment, you could pull that up and display that directly. So, I sort of put that out in our thumbnail, but if you sort of look at this over here, this is basically what I have, where when this one comment, which is the one that's down here, when this gets updated, this is what we're going to write this to. And the way we do that is we have a script that is running in the background. So it's continuously running. And every half a second, it goes and says, let me look at whatever is in the root comment and then write it out. So that way, within sort of a half a second, these are always written and updated. So that gives you an easy way to do that. So to do this, let me actually show you. Let's take the output of vMix, and I'll show you what this would look like. So here would be your, the typical, this is my camera shot, I'm doing my live presentation, whatever. Now, the classic thing would be if somebody had a comment, you'd see that comment come in and, you'd sort of leave it up there for a certain amount of time and then pull it down. But that may not be ideal in every situation. You may turn around and say, I'd really rather have the comment, for this type of comment, slide in from the side. Maybe it's, it just lets me format better. I can have multiple guests on one side. It just may work better for what I'm trying to do. I now have that ability. So I can just go and say, I want to pick this one, or I want to pick this one, and I can do it dynamically as the flow of the show dictates for what I'd like to do. The other thing is, say you had people that were at IBC or one of the big trade shows, and they were going around to vendors, and as you were live, they were sending you comments with photos of different products or different vendor booths or other stuff. You may want to be able to say, I don't want that across some little bar on the bottom. In here, if you look, we do have a little photo at the right-hand side of the comment, but it's not very visible. So what could be much more useful is something like this, where I could come in and say, I have the same information here, but now this is the photo that just came in. And if I wanted to talk about this or get into more detail about a product, this could be a much more useful layout for what I'd want to show. And this is the real reason behind this. If you are just looking at this as, I just wanted slightly different formatting, it doesn't have a compelling reason. But if you look at it and say, there are different elements of a comment that I may want to highlight, or significantly different layouts that I need to support based on what I'm showing on my screen, then this can become very, very useful. So the other thing is, and I'll go back to my multi-layout here while I'm here. I just wanted to show you, because we use comments here, I'm not trying to pull comments from vMix Social directly, but what I am doing is I have a little script that will update the comments in the root social, the same way vMix Social would. So you can see here, if I change these, when I change one, you can see they propagate pretty quickly. So it gives me that ability to have this sort of easy propagation without having to do anything special with any of this. So all of this is done via basically a fairly small script that just has a few core elements in it. But we'll do that next. But before that, I just want to see, I think we may have a few more comments here. So, we have one more comment here. Do you have any thoughts on Social Ninja plugin for Rumble or XChats? I have to tell you, I haven't really looked at that yet, but that is definitely something that is interesting. It's sort of on my follow-up list, but I apologize, I don't have a more substantive comment yet on that. But hopefully, as I find stuff, I may actually revisit the whole comment space with what tools are available and what the limitations are for the different sites. So that may be a good show to do. So Ken, thank you for asking. I'm sorry I can't do more to give you a satisfactory answer on that. Okay, so let's look at, let me see if I get this here. So yeah, so let's look at the script that I have here. And this will, hopefully, line up pretty closely with exactly what I had here. So we start out, a few simple definitions. What you see me doing here is this is everything I have to set up to say which inputs have titles that I want to update. So, so basically I'm saying I'm going to have 2 additional titles that I'm going to use. That's what I have here because I have the root and then the 2 others. The root title is going to, the data is going to be read into here. And so this is another XML node. We've talked about XML lots of times. And this is basically where I turn around and say, what's the name of the root title input? So I know what to look. So that's called root social here, but that's how we set it up. And then I have a string that's an array that has a place where I can store all of the titles that I may want to update, the names of the inputs of those titles. And so that's what we have here. And this block here does exactly that. So you just turn around and say, these are the 3, the root social is the input, that's the base input, and then the target title 0 and 1 are the targets that I'm going to propagate that root data set to. And so that's sort of the core of it. If in the way this is set up, you could plug in anything that's a vMix social title. So I could just take a standard title out of add title and just put that in there. And if it's a vMix social title, just put the input name that you put it in, and it should do that propagation. I will put an asterisk on that because there are a few things to be aware of, but just to note, this should work across any type of vMix social compliant GT title. So with that all set up, what I'm doing next is just going in and saying, these are all the elements that I can pull out of a vMix social title. And so it's the photo of the person who sent it, an attached photo if there's something they took a picture of and connected it. The source, so the root source is this a YouTube logo? Is this a Facebook logo, a Twitch logo? Whatever that is, that will come in there. Now just be a URL for that. And then I have all of the textual elements. Those are all graphical elements. Then all the textual elements will be, what's the name of the person? What's their handle? If they have a username, that would go with that. If they added a title to the post, it would be there. And what's the message that they typed to sort of say, great new product to do, blah, blah, blah. That's what you get there. So that's all we have set up here. And now we just go into a main loop. This is all just defining what we needed here. And our main loop is pretty straightforward. We go into and open the vMix XML. This is something we've done multiple times. And let me see if I can wrap this so you can see everything here. So then what I start to do is pull all the data elements out that I want to use. So in this case, I'm pulling out the from name and I'm pulling out the message. So who sent it? And these are the 2 text elements that I'm using. But you can also pull other fields if you wanted to use them. So you could use this, I told you about the username, the from username, that's their user tag, and you could pull that. The other thing is the title, which you could pull. And again, we weren't using that for this demo, but you could certainly have those in there if that was something you needed. Now, this is the asterisk that I mentioned. Inside of vMix, for GT title, social titles, they actually changed how they pulled elements, how they named elements inside of the social title. And it used to be that for photos, they used to, as opposed to saying from photo.source, which is the way it is today, you would refer to it as from photo.fill.bitmap. So you could potentially have some older title templates that are using this older scheme. So I didn't feel like, it was worthwhile making this into a sort of a code test and complicate the code to support something. But just be aware, if that is something that you're going to need to work with, I just want you to know that's what you'd have to do. So all we're doing here in pulling all of these is we're just creating a basically the XPath we need to pull the data from. And we're saying, look for the name, give me anything that has a name from name dot text, and that's where we pull the text. And that's all we're doing here. So we do that for all of the text. And then down here, we're doing this for all of the images that we're going to be using. And again, that's just from photo, any attached photo, and the icon of the source of the comment, Facebook, whatever. Once we have that, then we're just doing a very simple loop. And it's what we're doing is we're going to each one of the inputs that we have. So we said we put them in an array. So the array has a count of 2 because we said there's 2 other inputs that we're going to be using to propagate to. I'm just going in there, looping from 0 to length minus 1 because it's 0, 1. It's 0 based, not 1 based as an array. So the first one is 0, the second one is 1. And we are writing the text elements into that. And this is a standard shortcut. And we take set text, the target input file, that's the name of the input. So this would be something where I had like social2. That would be the first one. So it'd be set text input equals social2, which would be the first one. And selected name equals messages.text. That's telling it what element inside of the title do I want to write the text to. And then I just say the value equals whatever that root message I pulled out. So that's it. I'm just going through all of these, doing that for all of the text fields, which will be the name.text. And then we're doing the same for all of the graphics fields. And in this case, I can, because I knew that for my title, I was using from photo.source. So I knew I could read that. I didn't have to read from photofill. From photofill.bitmap. But I can write it to both. It just ignores it if it's not there. So this means that you could use older title templates and still get the core information written out to them. So this is for your from photo, and note that these use, instead of .text, it uses .source. And that's just to be aware of that. But this gives you the way to do it. So it's set text for all the text elements and set image for all the image elements. And then we go to sleep for half a second and go back and do it again. And that's it. So this is definitely a sort of a pretty lightweight script that can run in the background. And this gives you multiple titles to work with. So I know this was a fairly short show. So let me actually jump over, see if we have any more comments here, and then we can jump to the post show. So neat trick. Thank you. I think this could be really useful for people. And if you just put in another title and added it to the code here, it should work, for any number of titles. The functionality is pretty quick to run, so that should get you there if this is something that would be useful. All right then, as I said, fairly short show today, but what I'd like to do is I want to jump into our post show. I know that Michael had a question regarding triggering actions when you have your video ending, but the video is playing in a layer. So that's possibilities there. So we'll give that a look and see if we can work something out that would work for Michael. And we'll talk about anything you want to discuss here. So as I said, and I know it's been it's a long sort of post-season for season 4, but we're hopeful that by later in the summer we'll be ready to launch season 5, and but until then we're going every other week. So if you can't hang around for the post show, I will see you in 2 weeks from Friday, from today, and if not, I'll see you in a minute. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Be well. All right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us for this post show here. I just wanted to. This is interesting because this is a true use case for us as well. If you look over on the right hand side of the screen here, this over here now, we have a comment that is in a different format than our comments during the show. This is actually done by one of our guys here that changes it in vMix Social between the main show and the post show to get these different formatted layouts for our comments. But so this is something we were doing as well. So some of these things are things we will probably be using internally for what could make sense for us to make this our lives easier as well. So, but to Michael's question, this is actually a pretty cool question, and it's something that can be really frustrating. One of the things, let me start with the normal way that we would handle this. If this were playing in an input as the core layer in the input, this is what you'd use a trigger for. So you would go in and you would put it into the, let me jump over to vMix, and I'll just sort of go because we have a video looping here. So if I went over here and so let me go here and we go to this presentation. This is just a video that loops. And so this would be something you do in triggers. So it's actually the first one here. So you just sit there and say, on completion, when this video ends, I need you to fade to preview. And if you were happy with that, that's sort of the default, you would just put it and add it there. So now when this video plays and ends, it'll go back and switch to whatever's in preview. So the difference here is that Michael has a video that's in a layer. So one potential way to handle this is to we'll do the simpler way first. One potential way to handle this would be to make the video the base layer as well. So this is your sort of input, and then layer everything else on top of it. So like put the video, put a backdrop over the video so you can have a background, and then layer all your elements out on top of that, including the video maybe cropped down into a box somewhere, and associate the trigger to happen, the action that you want when the video ends with that base layer. And it'll also, just coincidentally, when the video stops playing in the layer above it, it'll trigger the thing and everything would work. So because that video is playing only once, there shouldn't be any sync issues. It's not two copies of the video that you have to keep in sync. You'd only have one video playing, one audio source. You would just have it laid out as two layers. And I believe from a timing point of view, you won't run into sync issues. It should look fine, even though it's stacked on layers. So that would probably be the most direct way, if that would work. I haven't tried it. I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head on this one. But if that would work, that would probably be the most direct way to do this. The other way is that you can read inside of vMix. Let me again. I'll just keep tearing into this and see if I can dig down another layer in here. Okay, I'm gonna put this over here. So let's go into local host, and all we're gonna do is take a look at the. Okay, so this is the vMix XML. So if you wanted to do something scripting-wise, I believe, and I just have to look at all this stuff, you could, so yeah, I think this is, well, I got a background loop video and I got the presentation video. So I can turn around and I can look at the state, and while it's playing, I could not do anything, but when it stops, I could turn around and take some sort of action. And the way you could actually do this is when you, if you have a shortcut that goes to that layout, what you could do is have a little script and use script start dynamic, put something that launches the video and this script sort of in as two separate commands associated with that shortcut. And then when this thing changes from, I think it's running to pause, you could end up, using that to take an action, like move to preview, do a merge or a fade to preview, things of that sort. So that would be another possible way. Again, I haven't tried either of these, but that could be interesting. That may actually be an interesting show as well, to sort of talk a little bit about how to work with elements that you want to do something statewise that are still that are still in layers, and you don't really get the ability to associate triggers with them. So let's hopefully that was helpful in getting you there. So does that make if that makes sense? Let me know. So Thomas says, I want to create YouTube chapter marks on the fly with the current production time. Copy and paste chapter marks into the description. Okay, so let me sort of jump back here, because there's to sort of give some context to what Tom is saying. Inside of YouTube, if you post a video in YouTube, in the description for that, if you actually go and put like a timestamp, space, and then a name that you want associated with that, and you can put like a whole list of them, YouTube will read that and assign chapter markers to those times and put that name that you have after the time with that chapter marker. So if you were to look at YouTube, you see these little bar breaks in the bar across the bottom for the like play out bar. And that would show you where all the chapters are. And if you hovered over them, you'd see the name of that chapter. So it's a very, very useful thing. And I believe, because Tom did mention this before, and I apologize, a lot going on the other side of the neural net side of things. We're busy, but I think he mentioned this around church services, where he wanted to be able to segment different ones. So the way you can do that is you could have a script that would, I'm just trying to think where I could read the production time from. And I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. I just have to look, but I'm sure it's possible to do that. But you'd have to do something where you could read production time, and then it's just a simple question of writing it to a file, and that you can easily do in vMix script. You'd have to do it though with something like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, so at least you could mark the chapters. Or if you knew in advance, so like say, Tom, if this is a church service, you may have different elements of the church service that you could sort of dynamically be aware of, and in your script automatically say, okay, if this is chapter 1, this is going to be, the processional in. If this is going to be the, celebratory song, the homily, the closing. So if you knew where all of those elements fit, like chapter by chapter that you're marking, that's something that you could actually even do, where you could have sort of the name for that. So I'd have to look into the timer and how you could pull that information out, because you need it from the point that the stream went to YouTube. So I'd have to see. I mean, one of the things you could potentially do is have a really long video that plays in the background. So say a 2-hour video. And I know in scripting you can read the timeline of that. Where in that video am I at any given point in time? So that if I can't think of any other way, that would give you the ability to come there and say, when I go and say stream, when I press that button, I also trigger this video to play in the background. And as that plays, I use that as my clock. And pulling that time out of the clock, I could then, every time I hit a key, it could come back and say, I'm going to pull the time from this, and I'm going to write it as a chapter. And you could either have it running in the background all the time, or you could simply write which chapter marker am I up to and write that in a dynamic value. And then every time the script starts, it reads the dynamic value, knows what chapter it's writing, reads the time, puts it together and writes that out as a file. And if it needs to, use that to determine what chapter title to use, you could do that. So Michael's asking, can you get production time from the streaming clock? That's what I wasn't sure of. So if everybody is patient, I can just actually look in the time here. So I know it's available. Let me. I'm going to do this right here. So so one of the things you can do. So let's actually switch back to this. One of the things you can do over here is, if you are here, you can open this up and say, I want to create an input with the production clock. So that's sitting down there. And if you have this start at the same time that everything would start for your live stream. So now I have this. If I actually go over here and let me go to sort of localhost again and see. So I'm going to move this over here. So, okay, so now that I have the production clock in there, that will be all the way at the end. Let's see. So it says it's paused. So I'd have to look. I mean, this is the input with the production clock in it. I'm not sure what it's doing. So let me see if I can get it to, if there's anything I can have it. I do it up here. Yeah, I'd have to look. I mean, so you can have a couple of clocks here, which I knew you could do. Maybe it has to do something where you do an offset, and I'm having sort of a countdown in here. I'd have to look, but that's a good point, Michael, that I may be able to pull this out of here and see what I could do. I may have to set this up where I actually have a start time and a countdown, because it may be saying it's paused. So if I set this up to say I want to do, let's do an event. And we start at, we'll just say, we'll look at this and say as if we started here for our show, which starts at 2 p.m. And I let this run. Let me see, is that, so now, so this is running now. So it's sort of looking here. Let me refresh this over here and we'll see. So yeah, I'm not seeing this information here, but again, I'm just doing this sort of as a first pass on the fly. But there may be some way to do this. So definitely worth digging in. Let me actually make a note on this. Using production clock. Okay, so thank you for that. Hopefully I can figure out something more specific. But Tom, that would probably be the best way to do it. So let's see. Oh, so Ernesto, thank you. Always great to have you here. And from Buckeye, Arizona. Great to have you here, Ernesto. Thank you. So, and can I store the mark info in dynamic variable, then copy and paste from there? If you're going to do that, it is not, you'd need to have each of these, trying to think of how to, you would need to have all of them like in aggregate. So you're not storing a single value. You're storing at a bare minimum, you're storing a list of timestamps, starting with 0 as the opening or the intro, and then going from there. So if you wrote a script that kept looking at a dynamic variable, and when it sees that it changed, you could write that out. So that would be one way to do it. But the other way is every time you hit something, you can take and store XML inside of the dynamic variable, which is something we've talked about in the past for storing multiple items in a single dynamic value in this case. If we're storing things in a single dynamic value, and then you would just add to that. So you'd read that in and append the next time to that. And so you'd set these all up as sort of in a big XML thing, chapters, and then you'd have sort of chapter, number equals 1, and then you'd put the timestamp in it, close chapter, and you'd have a set of those that you'd be pushing out, and then you'd end it with the, chapters marker at the end, something like that. So you could sort of sit there and create an XML file that at any given point you could press a button, say, take this dynamic value and just write it out and put it there. So that's another possibility for that. But I think probably if I were doing this, I would write this out to a file most directly. So I would sort of sit there and go, when I press a button, I would open the file and append the current timestamp to it, append whatever I needed for the chapter marker, and then close the file and have that. So that file would sit externally from the vMix session, and you could use any other program to work with that. So that's another approach, but that would, I think, be probably the best one for this type of use case. You don't really want to lock the information inside of vMix if you want to use it somewhere else, and just sort of hope that you don't restart your vMix session in the middle of a production, lose all that or something of that sort. So my gut is that every time you want to hit a chapter, you just press a button, read a file, append, and write that file back, and make sure you have that. And then it's easier to use. If you wanted to write another program that's looking at that file sort of outside of vMix and doing whatever you want with it to update something in Google, because Google has a whole set of APIs for YouTube. So, with that, maybe something you could write dynamically, things of that sort, that may work the best for you. And that's just my thinking on this from a response to a question. So Tom is also saying, currently have lower third with chapter info, which uses Excel data source. I could key mark when I do lower third. Yeah, I mean, you can use whatever you want as a trigger for, putting up these different pieces of for activating these different pieces of code to do things. So you could turn around and do it on a key. You could have a single key with a script start dynamic where you just put a few different commands together in that with a single shortcut key, which could trigger things. And yeah, if you're driving the lower thirds off of Excel and moving through sort of row by row in Excel to put up the next thing, that would be very, very straightforward to do that. There may be other ways, and I'm just I'd have to think of, is there some way you could write that back into Excel where you could have a column in Excel that you could then write to, because I know that Microsoft Office has a whole set of APIs as well. So there may be something you could do to update that, or with Google Sheets, if you were sort of using Google Sheets, they may also have a way where you could write that, and then your Excel file or your Sheets file would have that information updated, and you would have sort of everything ready to go, and you could just extract that from the sheet to put it into YouTube. So hopefully one of those approaches would work. There are multiple ways to do it, though, and that's really the cool thing about production. There are so many different ways to do any one thing that you never have to feel like you're trapped. Like, okay, I got to make everything shoehorn into this. There's tons of ways to do things, and scripting just gives you more options with all of that. All right, so let's see. Do we have any other comments? So Pepe, hello from Italy. Pepe, thank you for joining. It's great to have you here, and I'm glad you are spending your Friday night with us. So Spatial from Indiana. Spatial, always good to see you. Hope everything's going well for you. Oh, very, very happy that you were able to connect at all. It's always very much appreciated. As for everybody, just the fact that you make time to join us live, collectively, I am incredibly grateful for that. So Spatial saying, I really wish they would open vMix Social to capture data from Rumble or even a custom WordPress page. Yeah, there are lots of things that I would, I think that from the automation side, there's a lot of cool things that I would love to see added to vMix. Yeah, I mean, everybody has different APIs for these things, so I can understand, that people may want these APIs to mature. And speaking as a product company as well as doing the show, I understand that it's easier to add a feature to a list than to implement the feature and support it and everything else. And one of the things that I think isn't that visible when you use a product is that when you are tying into a third party, especially a bigger third party than you are, you're sort of at their whim. So if you have a production on Rumble and the night before Rumble changes their API or makes some sort of adjustment, you're then like, okay, now everything breaks. And so if you're vMix, you've got to sort of scramble to say, I got to get this fixed. And these become sort of emergency things because you're not necessarily part of the decision process when these things get implemented on a third party. So you are always in this uncomfortable spot. But where you have functionality internally that that can be added, I definitely see the value in just extending a lot of these things. Like I'd love to see vMix script be open up well beyond. I'd love to see functions in here and things of that sort where I can store values and have one thing read them, one script write them, and another read them without having to use dynamic values. Things that I could see being really, really valuable in terms of the automation side. But again, this may just be that I'm focused here. But if the folks at vMix are looking at the entire market they sell to, they may be looking, going, there's a small group of people that are doing scripty things, and it's just not a well spent use of resource time to do that. I'd rather add a different feature or add some stability in something that I wasn't happy with or things like that. So always difficult to tell, but I definitely get that when you're sort of sitting here and you want to do stuff. It's like, if only they did that. So definitely get that, Spatial. Thank you. All right, then. We are probably at a good point to wrap up then. Hopefully everybody found this interesting and useful. There were a couple of good suggestions for things. So, I'm definitely going to look at stuff with the production clock. That was one of the things that people talked about. And I don't have to go back through the comments again, but let's see. Yeah, it's something on, streaming and where you can get comments from the different sites. So that may be just talking a bit more about that might be an interesting thing for a show as well, because I know there is a lot of confusion about what you can and can't do with different parts of Facebook, and we have constant, honestly, we have constant problems with getting comments off of Facebook. So I know that can be a challenge for everybody. So, all right then. So with that, we're going to call it a wrap for today's show. Thank you all for spending the last, 45, 50 minutes with us. I really appreciate it. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Until then, be safe, be well. Take care, everyone.